Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Brothers Beyond. My name is Andrew Langhorst,
I'm Ted Smith.
and today we're going to be talking about fathers. Fathers are really important to men, and we want to talk about this because I think we are all impacted by our fathers in ways that we know and ways that we don't know. They role model what a man is and how a man acts in relationship and how they go about their lives. And it's really important to see and recognize. And there can be a lot of wounding and a lot of trouble that comes from how we were treated by our fathers.
Yeah, we learn by osmosis, especially as kids,
Yeah.
and we take on patterns and beliefs of both our parents.
Yep.
But particularly as men, we model a lot after what we see in our dads.
Yep. 100%. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I think I'm going to start, Ted, if you don't mind. I want to ask you, what was your dad like and how were you impacted by him?
Yeah. My dad, wow, there's a lot there. I really love my dad. I care about my dad a lot. And I have evolved quite a bit in my relationship with my dad in terms of how I feel about him, how I think about him.
Mm-hmm.
I've butted heads a lot with my dad, and I've grown to a space where I feel a lot more compassionate and I understand him a lot better now.
Yeah.
So, to answer your question of what my dad is like, he is very caring. He is very funny. He is always trying to break tension with a joke and crack smiles, and he loves a good laugh. And my dad also experienced a lot of trauma in his childhood, and that affected a lot of how he shows up in relationships, how he either cares for or is cared for, and how emotionally available he is or isn't. And that ties into my frustrations and my challenges with my dad, which is very common. And he is of the generation, he's in his 80s now, so he was born in I think 1941.
So he's quite a bit older than you. He's not wasn't a young dad per se.
Correct. Yeah, I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and I was a happy surprise. My dad was 46 when I was born.
Wow.
So, and he had experienced fathering, my older siblings, and then I kind of came along and my parents got to do it all over again.
Yeah. So he sounds like he's really caring and likes to joke and use humor to break tension and get people to laugh and smile. And also it sounds like maybe there's a hard bit of, that came out through the different traumas that he went through in his own life that changed how available he was to you emotionally. Did you notice that? Did you ever, you probably can't notice when you're a kid, but did you notice, or did you put that together later?
Yeah, a lot of understanding and compassion came with hindsight. There was a lot that I didn't understand as a kid. I absorbed a lot, and I maybe, felt a lot, even if it was subconscious at the time. But there's way more in hindsight that I've come to understand. And so one of the things was when I was born, my dad was going through a really tough time. With depression and stuff like that, diagnosed depression.
Yeah.
And my birth kind of gave him new life, and which is great. And at the same time, I think kind of cemented some of my early role as a savior or a rescuer.
Oh, okay. That's
It
interesting.
was one of my big epiphanies toward the beginning of my healing journey. Was I was in a 15-year relationship that was highly codependent and abusive and all the things. And I had very much taken on the rescuer role in that dynamic. And when I started healing and doing some group therapy work, that's when I had the epiphany of oh my God, I was literally born a rescuer.
Wow. Yeah. Your dad or your parents kind of put you in that role as he was struggling so much, and he was like, oh my gosh, there's this boy and gives me purpose, and maybe you can help me feel better. And so you're like, yeah, Dad, I love you. I'll help you feel better.
Yeah.
And then you just kept doing that. Yeah. Gets us into trouble, huh?
Yeah, because that, then translated to how I showed up in relationships later on. So yeah, when it comes to the emotional availability, I honestly don't know if maybe it's happened, but I cannot remember a time when I've actually heard the words "I love you" from my father.
Mm-hmm.
And
You're not alone there.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until recently that I also don't think I'd heard the words "I'm proud of you." But the story I have for our conversation today is it translates to how some men in particular may express these things in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And, me as a kid and even part of me as an adult, like I so would love to hear those words, those exact
Yes.
words
Yeah.
directly. But I've come to know that he does feel that way. He just maybe doesn't express it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the story I have is my parents had a baby book for me, as many parents do. And in a group therapy session, I remembered and shared with the group that my mom had written me a note when I was a kid. There was a morning where she had to leave early for work, and so I didn't get to see her. My dad stayed with me during the day when I was a kid. And the note from my mom said, "Hi, Ted. I'm sorry I missed you this morning. You can have peaches on your cereal, and I will hold you 2 times tonight. Love, Mom."
Mm-hmm.
I could remember this note, and I shared it with the group, and everybody was, crying and just loving on how like sweet and amazing that note was. Like, "I'll hold you 2 times," and just the simplicity of, peaches on your cereal. And so I went to, I had my baby book in my possession, so I went to get it, and I wanted to show the group the note. And underneath the note from Mom was writing from my dad that had the date that this was done. I was 4 years old, and he wrote, "At 4 years old, Ted was able to read this entire note on his own. He only needed help with the words peaches and cereal." And like in that moment, I noticed that in my baby book, like 80% of what was written, the other stories, the other experiences, were my dad's writing. He was the one who documented so many of the funny, silly things that I said as a kid, or the, big moments and stuff.
Yeah.
And it just it hit me in that moment of like, my dad is proud of me. He just may not say it directly.
Yeah.
Like the emotional availability isn't there to be like, "I love you, Ted. I'm proud of you, Ted." But very clearly, like,
Yeah.
that is there.
Yeah.
And so I grew a new appreciation, understanding for where he's at.
Yeah.
And, like I said, understanding all the stuff that he experienced as a kid, which I won't go into here, just helps shape my understanding of how his mind works, how his heart works,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and his availability for
Yeah.
relationship.
I think it's so interesting. Like, that's a beautiful story, and like, what a blessing to have some kind of evidence to go back and look at, and like have this realization that like, oh wow, my dad really does love me and care about me, is proud of me. There's so many men out there that don't get anything even remotely close to that, or get the direct opposite. My father hates me or doesn't approve of me at all. So like, what a gift and a beautiful thing to realize. And how interesting that the world and life is shaped in such a way that we don't really understand our parents' love all the time, and especially when we are a child, when we're developing.
Yeah.
And clearly we don't understand the world. We don't have an adult mind, so we can't really know and see. But just how it's so interesting that that's how it is, and what kind of pain it can cause, because very similar, I had a dad who, it's just so common, not emotionally available, not emotionally present in so many ways, and most of the time, almost all of the time. And yeah, it's only when I became an adult and really started to do some work and dig into things and look at things and be guided through some healing that I could really see that, wow, my dad really does love me a lot. And it's my pain and my difficulty really only came from my inability to understand that this was his way of expressing love.
Yeah.
I think for so many men out there, guys like to express care by doing,
Yeah.
acts of service.
Correct.
Right? Acts of service or support. And it all comes from that kind of that role of being a provider, being the head of the house, the guy that puts the food on the table and keeps the roof over your head. That is a tremendous act of love and service. And that's kind of how my dad expressed a lot of it. And it wasn't until later that I was able to see that and understand that. Because you take that for granted, you know, when you're a kid. You just get to wake up and eat food every day and have a decent house to live in. You just kind of expect that because that's all you ever see, you know.
You mentioned having some realizations of your dad's love for you. Do you have examples or stories of like how, and maybe it wasn't a defining moment for you, but like what were some ahas for you around that of kind of seeing him in a new light?
I would say when I became an adult and when I passed my teens and my early 20s, I kind of realized how challenging it can be to have a good and stable career and to make good money and to go to a job every day, 9 to 5, how challenging that can be. Like not only finding something that you're good at and that you care about and that really creates a strong foundation for your family, but to be so dedicated and involved in it. It was only like really seeing that as an adult, like, wow. And to hear him say that, to tell me, I heard him tell me in my mid-20s when I was starting to heal, get sober, and to start to clean it up and self-reflect and dig in. I had all this pain of, he doesn't love me. He didn't care about me. He never asked what I was interested in, never got involved in my interests, never fostered my interests. I was big into art growing up, and it just seemed like he didn't give a two shits about it. And I came at him sometime in my mid-20s when I started digging into this stuff. I think I wrote in a card twice, once for his birthday. Like, birthday card is supposed to say like, hey, happy birthday and I love you. And it was more like, what the fuck? This sucked and you hurt me and thanks a lot, you know? But I think I wrote 2 cards, that card and then probably on another occasion, because he didn't like to talk about stuff. It was hard to get him to say anything. So
Yeah.
I was like, if I write this in a card, I'll know he'll listen. I know I'll pay attention, you know? And then another time was a phone call. And I was really upset, and I said something like, you don't really care, you didn't really love me. And he's like, that's not true. And so I kind of got that pushback from him. And then at some point in that time period, he said how he does genuinely enjoy his job, but his motivation for work was to provide a good life for us. Like he told me he grew up like not having, they weren't poor, but they weren't, you know, they were like lower middle class, I suppose. And I don't think they took a whole lot of vacations and did fun stuff. And I think that he didn't want to give his kids the same experience. Yeah. So he really had this motivation of like, I want to give my kids a lot. And he did. And I didn't understand that that's what was going on. Right. I mean, we went on a lot of vacations. We did a summer vacation. We did a ski vacation for many years, and then we did camping in the fall. So we did a lot of trips, and I really didn't know that what was going on. I was just like, this is what people do with their family, you know? But he was showing love and care by giving us fun experiences and giving us stability and good food every day and good schools. So it was then when I was really like, you didn't care. And he was like, yeah, I did. And this is how I showed it. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that was what was going on.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you're right. Like as a kid, we don't know any other life, right? Unless we have
you
the
don't
contrast.
Have right, exactly.
Or until, like you said, like we're responsible for providing that stuff for ourselves or our own kids.
Yes. Yeah.
We don't necessarily realize anything different.
Right.
I can think of some other kids in my life who they have a lot and they don't know life any other way.
Yeah.
It sounds like that was an eye opener for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm interested to hear your experience of it all, but that felt really good for me to hear and to understand. That felt great to see. This is my father's love.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it made the pain of not getting my needs met a little bit less, but there's still a part of myself. I've done a lot of work with it, but there was still that part of myself that really yearned for a different kind of love, a different kind of intimacy, and really wished for those other needs to be met. How did you feel?
Yeah, it was hard for me as well. And one of the things that was coming to me as you were talking is I butted heads with my dad when I was a teenager growing up because he was very strict about like what the thermostat was set at and the number of showers that we took. He grew up in a generation where there was a lot of scarcity, like on the heels of the Depression era and stuff like that. And it took a lot of negotiating or showering when he wasn't home, that sort of thing, like to just get my basic needs met so that I wouldn't be made fun of by other kids.
Yeah.
And my parents had money to spend on things, but because of the generation where they grew up, they didn't want to spend it. And so as an adult, we may think of this as kind of insignificant, but for me in the classroom where I grew up, all my classmates had like name brand clothes and all the coolest gadgets and toys and stuff, and I didn't have any of that. And so that kind of established where I was in the hierarchy.
Right. Had to do with your self-esteem and things like that, probably.
So it developed a resentment towards both my parents, really.
Yeah.
Because I kind of blamed them for how other kids treated me. So childhood, teenage years, I had certain layers and levels of resentment. And then when I began my healing journey and began to understand both my parents' role and impact on me, that created a newer layer of resentment and frustration toward them about what they did and didn't do and how that affected me. Because I started recognizing my own trauma and the sources of my core beliefs about myself and about the world around me. I'm in a really great place now where I feel a lot of compassion, understanding, and love for my dad. And that took work to get to that place. Because I think similar to the story that you were sharing, it's like I wanted reparations, or I wanted the sorrow or the guilt to be expressed, and that's just not something that is going to be expressed in the way that my mind thinks it wants. When we have these experiences with grief and with challenging relationships, it can be a situation where someone has died and we feel like there's unspoken business. There's also situations where we have relationships with people where that sort of conversation just isn't.
It's not possible.
And it's hard to say like how much of that impossibility is truth and how much of it is my own perception.
Yes, that's good. I think it's important to figure that out. And if you're really committed and you're really doing your work, hopefully at some point you're able to move past the blockage. If it is on your side, you can move past it and seek to have that conversation rather than making an assumption or projection that it's not possible. There's two people that come to mind talking about this. There's a friend, a woman, but she has parents who who just aren't as understanding. They're very, very religious. And I think she has wanted some kind of sorry or acknowledgement of her pain or how she was shaped and all that. And she's done plenty of work. And I think she's come to, at least last time I spoke to her, that that's probably not going to happen. And just to, then her work is just to love them and accept what relationship she can have and tend to herself and love herself through the grief and the difficulty. Sometimes that's what you're left with. And the other person, their father died. And I've heard that story from a lot of guys that they started healing or something changed or shifted due to a health thing or some other kind of crisis. And they wanted to have that kind of conversation with their dad, but they passed before that opportunity was available. And who knows how it would have gone, it could have could not have been well, or they might not have gotten what they wanted. But there's a lot of grief from the loss of even that opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've noticed a trend in the social media that I follow of tends to be like people of a millennial generation who are kind of doing the work on themselves or going to therapy to hire a coach. And they develop this awareness of where stuff came from in their past. And it creates kind of what we're talking about here of these feelings of resentment and anger and frustration towards parents for what was lacking or what was,
Yeah.
even abusive, things like that. And then trying to have these conversations with parents, and it's not,
Yeah.
it's not going the way that we want it to.
Yeah.
And so it ties back to what I was saying. There's people who pass away and die, and it's impossible to have that conversation. And there's also these situations where the person is living, but you can't quite have the conversation that you're wanting to have because they're not receptive to it, or they're not open or available or interested.
Yeah.
And I share all that because it is possible to come to a place of peace and compassion and understanding and love on your own without actually requiring anything on their part.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it's easy, because it's not, but with commitment to yourself, like, it is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's what you can do. And so you should. You can't control your parents or whoever this other party may be, but you can work with yourself. And that there's a great deal of empowerment and the opportunity for you to get more peace and more just contentment and resolution. Here we are talking about our grief or our pain that resulted from how we were raised or how our fathers interacted with us. And I just became an official stepfather. And I had a really amazing, really great realization that came several weeks ago or a couple months ago or something like that. And that is, nobody makes it through without any pain. So you could have the best parents in the world, the best dad, and you don't come through and become an adult and not walk away with some kind of pain or some kind of trauma, whether that's a big T or a little t, that it's a fact of life that being a human is inherently painful, and that somehow we are going to be harmed or have pain in our life and in our childhood, and that we can be angry with the world, angry with our parents, and that's absolutely right. That's natural and right. And that if we can come to accept that this is how life as a human is and understand that, it makes it a little bit better. And also, I don't know about you, but I think all the pain and all the traumas and all that kind of stuff, there's a gift on the other side of it when you heal and when you go through these things, as shitty, as painful, as fucked up as they can be, and I don't wish that on anybody, anything like that. But if you engage in the work, you do come to a point where you find the gifts in it. And for me, you come to a point of accepting yourself and who you are and loving who you are, and the recognition of, like, I would not be who I am without those painful things, or without my father, without these things that I didn't want, that suck, that I hated, that I had so many tears over. But it's made me who I am, and I love who I am, and it gives me empathy for other people. So there's some tremendous gifts, but you have to be willing to see them. You have to get in and feel it all and unpack it. For those to you have to take out all the packaging, all the bubble wrap and tissue paper to find your gift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe that our souls choose a lot of our journey. I believe that we have free will as humans, but our souls kind of choose coming into this life, the family that we're born into, and like some of the major life experiences that we have. And our souls choose these things knowing that we as humans can overcome them and heal from them and experience what's on the other side of it. And I love what you're saying, because there's so much now that I'm so grateful for that I experienced, because it helped me understand myself. It helped me understand the world. And now I'm in a place where I have so much joy and gratitude and love that may not be at the level that it is if I hadn't gone through the shitty
Yep.
stuff.
Yep. Just a deeper appreciation, like with the more contrast that
Mhm.
existed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also believe that. And I think that belief about reincarnation and the reason that we're here and choosing those things is really popular these days. I've also noticed there's a little bit of a problem with that too, because it can, I personally went through this in my mid 20s when I started getting on my path, and I saw a bunch of people around me with the same thing of, okay, if you choose to believe this kind of spiritual perspective, the problem that arises is when you're in the pain, when you're really feeling the pain, you're like, why would I choose this? Because you can't see from the greater spiritual perspective. You're like, why would I choose this? And it almost can seem almost like victim blaming, you know? Like, well, it's your fault. You picked to have a shitty dad that fucked you up, and good job, and deal with that, you know. So it's this perspective can make you take on this like responsibility, like, oh, it was me, I did all of this.
Mhm.
And I really disagree with holding a perspective. For me, it's come to this holding both things and not making the spiritual perspective this, not being so anchored in it and everything, like, but to hold it lightly and to come from the human perspective. We're here ultimately, to our knowledge, we didn't choose these things, because that guilt or that shame or that confusion that can come up is really terrible and can be really difficult to work through. I've seen a bunch of people get kind of in this conundrum with the spiritual stuff of like, why did I do this and why am I doing this? It's like, it's not your fault. We have to honor and respect and really believe and hold on to, this is our human life. This is what we can see and understand from here. And we need to honor that. To completely let go of that in favor of this greater spiritual reality, I think is a disservice to ourselves. Yeah.
Another piece I wanted to share is tied to what I was sharing before around the millennial generation kind of healing and developing feelings towards our parents and things like that. The more work we do on ourselves, the more we expand our self-awareness, the more responsibility we have in
Yeah.
relationships.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that also includes our parents, which can be challenging because, we grow up with the mentality that our parents are supposed to guide us and show us the way. But I think as we evolve as adults, it's very, very common, and it's becoming more and more common for the kids to be the ones to have more awareness, more responsibility
Yeah.
in the relationships, to know these sorts of things.
Yeah.
And while that can maybe feel backwards, and there can be some resentment and frustration that comes with that,
Yeah.
believe me, I understand.
Yeah.
It also can be kind of refreshing and fun. And I was having a conversation with my dad last week in the car. It was just the two of us. And I was like asking him questions to open up about his childhood. Midway through the conversation, he goes, I know what you're doing. You're trying to get me to open up. Like, yeah, I am.
Yeah.
Because I'm loving this, because he lights up when he
Yeah.
talks about his childhood.
Yeah.
And I told him that. I'm like, I love your joy and I want more of that. And he's like, okay.
Yeah.
And so he just kept going.
Yeah.
It was a really great moment. It can feel like a chore or frustration whenever we have more responsibility in the relationship, but it's also such a gift that we can give
Yeah.
people on
Yeah.
the other side of it.
Yeah.
The joy and the gratitude and
Yeah.
the love
Yeah.
and the emotional connectivity.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much there as well. It doesn't have to all be like baggage or heavy.
Yeah. And I know the responsibility can be interpreted as difficulty or a burden, but I really, going back to like thinking about how our fathers modeled masculinity or modeled relationships for us, we're talking about how maybe our fathers failed in so many different ways. And going through this process of our healing and growth, I love what you're saying, because it like this idea that as you grow, you need to model, you need to go beyond and surpass what your father showed you or taught you, or what is even shown in our culture. It's our responsibility to become that man that has higher virtues and more integrity and more open-heartedness. It's our responsibility to walk around and carry that in the world and get other people engaged in it. And I really, truly believe that. We didn't get the models that we needed, but we must become them. Yeah.
And it can be really easy to focus on the gaps and the detriments and the fault
Yeah.
of our fathers or whoever else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the biggest gifts that I've had for myself is shifting that into, okay, what are the great things?
Yeah. Look
that
at the
my dad
positive. What did he
did?
do? You know? Yeah, that was big for me.
And like allowing that to be a new foundation versus
Yeah.
focusing on all the negative stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we are all human and we're all doing the best that we can.
Right.
And that doesn't
Right.
justify shitty behavior
Right.
or make
Right.
things right. But like,
Right.
not everybody, you know, it's like,
We're
it's not
not
all
perfect.
bad.
Right. Yeah. It's not all bad.
It's not. So
Yeah.
what are the good things?
Yeah. That's a really important thing to do. I agree. And I've done that as well. I think maybe 2 years ago, I went up to Chicago and did the Landmark Forum, the first Landmark Forum. Didn't end up drinking the Landmark Kool-Aid, but you know, they're not the owners of the wisdom, and there is a lot of good wisdom in there. But one of the really most powerful things that I enjoyed from that weekend was they had us think about our parents. They had us, what did they do? They had us like, if you're younger than 23, stand up. And they're like, you know, some of you might have had parents who had you when they were 23. Now look at this 23-year-old in front of you. And can you imagine this 23-year-old raising a child and how difficult and what resources they have available and what capabilities as a human, as a person at this level of maturity that they had? And it just brought so much more compassion and understanding to my parents, because my parents were about that age when they had me. And I was like, holy shit. You know,
Yeah.
I didn't have children in my 20s, but just to see a 20-something standing in front of me, like, this was my parents. And they were taking care of a baby. And they were trying to make money and own a house and run a household and get us places on time and keep us safe and all that. And I'm like, holy shit, like that is so much for anybody, you know, and especially at a young age. Yeah.
My parents had their kids pretty late. I was doing the math as we were talking, and my oldest brother, my parents were 29 and 26. And at that time, that was like late in life.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I'm really glad to see that people are waiting till their 30s or even 40s to have kids, because you have more life experience. You kind of know what you're doing. And I'm also really grateful. It's really awesome to see parents who are more evolved and more self-aware and have healed a lot, because then they bring that into their relationships with their kids. And it's really refreshing to see, because you're right. Like I even my own life, like to have a kid when I was in my 20s, like, it's no wonder, like, all the challenges have existed that are present for us. So,
I think there's a lot of talk on the internet about like population decline and young people not having kids anymore or failing to progress through the milestones of life and stuff like that. But I think there are several reasons. And I've heard a lot of older people applaud it. Like, it's really good that you're having them later, because you just have so much more knowledge of yourself. You're more stable inside of yourself. You have more wisdom that you've earned through your own life experiences, and more capable of handling that kind of challenge. So, and I think if you bring all that into raising a child, all that wisdom and stuff like that, I think you're likely to get a different, perhaps better outcome. I want to say better, but might get a better outcome, hopefully. Yeah. Also, that there's one thing I didn't touch on here, is that if your dad was just the worst kind of person and a complete piece of shit, you might still love them anyway, and that might feel really confusing and really hard. But there's nothing wrong with that, and that you can love your dad and him still hurt you very, very much. And I want to say, if that's the case in your life, that you can hold both of those things. And it's kind of important that you do, that you don't sacrifice your grief for your love, and you don't sacrifice your love for your grief.
Good.
Yeah, or your anger. Yeah. How about to wrap up, speaking about focusing on the good things, how about share? I mean, that was a beautiful story of like you learning that your dad really cared about you, but share one good thing about your dad or one good story about your dad or quality or feature or something like that. Maybe something that you wouldn't have seen before, but now
Yeah.
appreciate.
What's coming to me is not so much anymore, but when I was growing up, my dad was very much the guy who would talk to strangers and
Mm,
engage in conversation, make people
mm,
laugh.
mm,
He's more reserved now in his older age, but as a kid, I saw it and was kind of annoyed that it would take us longer to get to where we needed to be because dad
mm.
was having the side conversation.
Yeah.
But now I admire that so much because that is such a growth edge for me. Like
Mm,
I don't I don't typically strike up a conversation with a stranger. I'm
yeah.
open to it if somebody initiates, but I don't know, there's just some blockages there. And
Yeah.
so looking back on it, it's really cool to see because that takes courage, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was always something that's cool to look at.
Yeah. That's awesome.
What about you?
So my father is an engineer and has a background as a mechanic, although he does electrical engineering. And he taught me, like, I was involved in every project of fixing or upgrading our house and fixing our automobiles. And sometimes I was interested in doing that because I got to play with some tools and stuff like that. But a lot of times, especially with the cars, I didn't want to because it was difficult and dirty and hot, and I'd usually get hurt, like cutting your hands or burning your hands or something like that, or your arms. And it was difficult breaking rusty bolts loose on cars and stuff like that. And God, it really bothered me. I didn't like doing it all the time, but I was forced to do it. And I now see it as like a tremendous gift to have been taught so many practical skills. I really took it for granted and something I was like, oh, I wish I didn't have to do all that stuff. And why do you make me do this? He really was trying to teach me something important and valuable, and he did, despite my resistance at times. And I've gone through my life and done a lot of that work for people, side jobs, doing things on their house or their car and stuff like that. It's served me so well and been a source of income here and there. And I've heard so many people be like, holy shit, you can do that. You know what to do. You know about cars and you can fix your own car. And they're like, I wish I had that, or I don't know what I would pay to do that, or, to have that knowledge. And so I didn't know it. And now I'm like, wow, I've this huge gift, these skills. And,
Yeah.
and so I really appreciate him for that and appreciate the wisdom of an adult, like understanding children don't know why you're doing things or why you want them to know certain things, but they know and they're doing it for a good reason and it's right. And a lot of times. So yeah, and it's the same with my stepdaughter. She doesn't know why this is important or why she needs it and she protests, but I feel like it's my duty to maybe, of course, to care about her feelings, but also you need to learn this and I'm going to make you learn it. And I'm sorry. And I know this kind of sucks. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to care about you, but we're going to do this regardless. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Cool.
Retroactive appreciation.
Yep. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we could talk much longer about our fathers and fatherhood. And I think we'll probably do some more talks in the future. I think that's pretty good for today.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So what do you want to say to our viewers as we close out this episode?
There's so much love available,
Mm,
and we may not always feel it or express it
mm-hmm,
in the ways that we want.
mm-hmm.
And there's a lot that we can learn from our dads and from other people that may not seem like a gift at the time.
Yeah.
Whether it be, fixing cars or something more emotional, mental, kind of the broader scape of being a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hopeful that this conversation has helped illuminate some things that you can be grateful for and reflect on in terms of your life as a human being and your relationship with your dad.
Yeah. Nice. I want to say that don't be afraid And I know that dad stuff can be really hard and there can be a lot of anger, but it's so worth going into. Like, don't run away from it. If you're a man and you've started doing some work and you haven't touched on the father stuff yet, start. And it's vitally important. And I don't think that you can become the best version of yourself, the most capable, responsible, most loving. You can't give what you're here to give to the world without really going through that and looking at it and moving through those layers and levels. So I highly encourage you to do it. And the other thing I want to say is, we've been talking about, is have compassion. We need to have compassion for our fathers and appreciate them for what they did give and grieve what they didn't, and have compassion. There you go. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care. See ya.